Welcome to the Cause Effect 4.0 podcast with me, Celina Lee. This is where we dive deep into how technology is reshaping our world, unpacking the promises, challenges, and ripple effects of innovation. From the rise of artificial intelligence to the bold ideas transforming entire industries, we'll explore not just the breakthroughs, but also the concerns and hopes shaping the fourth industrial revolution. And I'm thrilled to kick off our very first episode with someone who embodies this conversation, AI leader and futurist, and my friend, Alex Tsado. Welcome to the podcast, Alex.
Yes, thank you very much, and it's good to see you again, Celina, as always.
Alex is a Nigerian-born AI strategist, entrepreneur, and impact leader who's built a career at the intersect of technology, business, and social good. Alex, I've known you for so many years, and you've worn so many different hats, from a career at NVIDIA to being a co-founder of Alliance for AI. Now you're the CEO, co-founder of UduTech. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background and how you've gotten to where you are.
Yes, in terms of my background, I've really been, I started also as a software engineer, eventually go into business school to think about what was happening in the world and how do you make decisions on how to invest in technology. And right after that, got a placement within NVIDIA. NVIDIA was a relatively unknown organization at the time in 2016, where it was mainly about graphic cards used for gaming. And I joined this small group within it that was data center, that was trying to see how this same GPU, computer chips or graphic cards can be used to accelerate artificial intelligence. So it was a very early nascent industry at the time. And my responsibility was to be the product manager that would build a team that would work with cloud service providers to adopt GPUs and rent them out to customers for building AI. AWS ended up being the first one, and that grew across most of the cloud service providers across the world. And that basically democratized access to AI, because instead of needing to spend at least $1 million to set up a NVIDIA GPU cluster, you could now rent a GPU for $5 an hour on AWS and the other platforms. And that was transformational because, as you're aware, Celina, the GPUs speed up computing. And so when you're training an AI model, the GPUs can make you anywhere from 50 to 1,000 times faster. And that was very, very crucial. So that's where really I started my AI journey, was really at the center and the core at NVIDIA. But since then, like you said, I've stepped out of NVIDIA to work on several initiatives that were trying to bring Africa along the journey and ensure that we're not getting left behind in this very, very crucial and important technology revolution. I think along with people like yourself and a few others, we've been trying really hard to bring the continent along, and we've made quite a bit of progress, but we're probably still being left behind. I hope we're going to do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about Alliance for AI. As founders, of course, we're trying to build a business, but we're also, we're also fighting for certain causes that we believe in. So maybe I'm curious how you would describe the cause that you're fighting for, the cause that is worth fighting for, that you've left your job at NVIDIA, the corporate sector, taking that leap into startup land. What is your cause?
Yes, I remember the day that cause became a lot clearer to me. It was when I was still at NVIDIA. At NVIDIA, the CEO is Jensen Huang. The world now talks about him because like a rockstar tech CEO has created AI. So important. At NVIDIA, it was like his meeting room is almost like a spaceship. It's shaped like a spaceship, where he brings in anywhere from roughly, on average, like 50 people come in to come present and discuss and ideate. And there was this particular day when we were preparing for a very, very big conference, and an engineer demonstrated what had become possible because of GPUs to a really incredible scientist from NASA, right? This woman had worked for a very long time trying to simulate what it's like to land safely on Mars, and it had been impossible. It's just completely impossible to do that. Every time you try to land on Mars, the the spaceship crashes, and just lots of bad things happen. But because of the simulation, the speed up on the simulation that was possible with NVIDIA GPUs, we were able to demonstrate landing on Mars safely for the first time. And this woman, just tears balling at her eyes, she was crying and was so moved that this had become possible and that humanity could go to space, could go to Mars, and we could push civilization forward. I was in that room and I was also tearing up. But I was tearing up because I was thinking, well, there's only two of us here in this room from Africa. We are getting left behind. We're not going to be on that spaceship going to Mars. So that's when I realized that, yes, NVIDIA was on a rocket ship in all senses, and literally going on a rocket ship. And also the stock price was growing incredibly. And if I stayed there, I would become this huge millionaire. But I was just so worried that my people were going to get left behind. My family still lived in Nigeria. I still had lots of friends in Kenya, South Africa, and whatnot, and they were not part of these plans. To be part of these plans, you needed people who are going to dedicate their very significant parts of their careers and their lives to trying to make it happen. And so I decided that I was going to fight for that cause. It wasn't now just about going to Mars. It was ensuring that more people got to go to Mars, especially from Africa, my continent. And as I said, to dive into the problem, I realized there was many more people in the global south, even in Latin America, that were being left behind. And so that's why I really hope we figure it out and we, get things to where they need to be.
When did you move to the U.S.? How old were you when you left Nigeria?
Yes, I left Nigeria when I was 18 years old for college. Went to school, electrical engineering in New York, Columbia University. And that was funny. The first time I ever got on a plane, I got on a plane from Nigeria to go to New York, one of the craziest cities in the world. It was very, very interesting. I can tell you more about that another time.
So how do you see the opportunities, it's so complex. You're talking about how do we bring the opportunities, that the things that are happening in the little pockets in Silicon Valley, and how do we bring those opportunities to the rest of the world and people who typically don't have access to be in Jensen Huang's spaceship office, right? What do you see as like the key critical elements of that strategy? And also how should governments be thinking about it? How should, I guess, founders like us be thinking about it? What are those key opportunities, between skills and GPUs, as you were talking about? Like, how do you see all of that working? How do you prioritize? Where do you tackle first?
Yes, it's been very difficult, as you know, and you have experienced yourself. But I think it's key and critical to remember that it's a journey. It's a journey, and it's not something that happens with a snap of a finger. It takes time, and perhaps it's good for me to be a little fair and also mention that it takes time even in the United States. So yes, Silicon Valley has moved really fast because it has this culture of believing in the future, investing when there's no clear path to return and success. You'll find people with a pitch deck. They will make a presentation and someone will give them $5 to $10 million, right, to go work on their idea. This was before AI. And then with AI, people show up with their pitch deck and then they get $100 million to go figure it out. That's Silicon Valley.
Because they stuck the magic word in there.
Yeah, they said the magic AI word.
now it's become 100
they have
million.
some background and people give them $100 million to go and invest. So that is what it's like in Silicon Valley. In the rest of the US, as we worked on programs to try and drive adoption of AI in another company of mine called Ahura AI, right? we were trying to drive adoption of AI. And what we found is people who lived in other parts of the US, like Chicago, Philadelphia, or who were not in tech, they were also a bit slower. It's called change management. Change management takes time, right? People are used to working the way they work. They're used to using the tools they use. And if you give them a presentation telling them that some tool does things better, it takes a long time before they choose to accept that new approach. Maybe a few percent, 5%, get it and start to do it. So you have to keep your eyes open for that 5% and work with those to be your champions so that they talk to their peers and their friends, and slowly it will increase. So that's what has happened in the US. So even within the US, it was tough to talk to some people, but it was a lot better, right? So if you can imagine that if it was that tough in the US to go outside of tech, you might want to imagine how much tougher it was in Africa to bring this information about artificial intelligence, and you are trying to convince government to invest in this space. It's something that still hasn't happened, so some people might say it's impossible. But we're trying to do the impossible here. So when
Who do you?
people in yes,
Well, I was just thinking. I mean, who do you think is best positioned to kind of break things out to get Africa into a different trajectory? I mean, who's best positioned? Is it the private sector? Is it the companies? Is it the
yes,
governments? Yeah.
they all have a role to play, and typically it's, as I said, that it's a journey. The journey usually starts with people who care a lot about that geography, and they're typically people who are from that place. If you look at the example of India, there were Indians who worked in tech companies. So they would always take the information they were learning back home to India. That's how it started. And later decided to build Indian companies in India. Those grew, and the government got very interested because they saw a lot of revenues and a lot of potential. And now India is an absolute powerhouse in technology, in outsourcing, and recently in AI. So that's what happened with India. So similarly, with us from Africa, us Africans in Silicon Valley and in tech have been going home and taking that information home and telling it to people, training people so that it will get picked up. But what has been very challenging, I've battled with this problem for a long time in my head, and I think the big thing is a mindset. The mindset is of the continent is one of being a consumer. It's one of being a consumer. So most investments in the continent are one where you are paying to consume some already created solution from the West or from Asia, from China, not about
Like
building at
consumers
home.
of tech, consumers of tech, and consumers of
Consumers of
AI.
tech, consumers of clothes, consumers of everything. When
Ah,
you're in Africa,
everything.
you just buy what's already made, and you don't try to make it yourself. But in the age of AI, we are pitching this message to the big companies, the banks, the telcos, the oil and gas, that you need your people to build the AI solutions, because it's only when your people build the AI solutions that's when you maximize the benefits of how you design it. You would reduce the harm, you would reduce the bias, you will make it more responsible. You would include your own data when your people build it. But the mindset is not a mindset of building, it's a mindset of buying. So we're trying to change mindsets, and mindset change is very difficult, which then tells me that perhaps maybe we need psychologists and people who are experts of mindset change. So we've been doing this wrong as tech people. We've just been coming as tech people, but maybe we need to hire therapists and something.
That's true. Or like, yeah, behavioral economics, right? Like that whole thing.
Behavioral scientists, yes. Maybe we need
Yeah.
to do more. I just came to my mind now. Maybe that's what we need to do. But what is it that we're trying to do? We're trying to get our governments involved. The governments are very, very crucial and critical to this. They must play a role. You remember earlier I said that in the US, you would come with a PowerPoint and you get $100 million. This was like several years ago. Now it's billions of dollars. The US said they're spending $500 billion on this. But when you speak to governments in Africa, I'm yet to see $1 million spent on this. I've not seen $1 million spent on AI by any government. They have made progress, i.e., from 2020, it was tough for them to talk about AI. Maybe they will say a little bit about it, but it wasn't a focus area. But after ChatGPT and many things that have happened the last 2 years, the governments are now at a place where they are talking a lot about AI. But I've still not seen $1 million get spent on AI. So it is incredible.
Yeah, I'd be curious what you think the role of the government is and how they can move out of this kind of cycle of as you said, talking about AI. And of course, that's the first step. But, I've seen a trend in Africa that there are quite a few AI strategies being developed. I think Ghana's working on their AI strategy. South Africa, Zambia, they've had their AI strategies. Rwanda. What do you think are ways that we can, or even us as startup founders, can help break, governments out of the cycle of talk and into the cycle of building and doing and, making that impact a reality?
Yes, it's a really tough one. And there is the how we do it, and then there is the what are we asking them to do. Perhaps it's good to talk about what we want them to do. So, or where they can get it from. Just simply looking at the kinds of investments that are coming from other parts of the world, US, China, Asia, the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, and whatnot. They invest in research and development, R&D, and in building, right? In the early days of AI, it was around 2 to 5% of the revenues of companies or the budget of governments was spent on AI infrastructure. When I say infrastructure, is the data, putting data together, and also compute, which is the GPUs, the NVIDIA GPUs, and other kinds of GPUs that speed up the AI process, right? So they spend 2 to 5% of their budget. That was before, but in the last 12 months, those numbers have started to come close to 10%. So this is how much governments of the world are spending on infrastructure. So African governments can literally look at it and think of it the same way. Is okay, what percentage of our budget will we spend on AI, right? Nigeria's budget is not very big. It's around, when you convert it to dollars, is around $20 billion. So if you converted that and said, okay, Nigeria wants to do just 1%, just 1% on AI infrastructure, what would that be? That would be around $200 million. $200 million. If Nigeria spent 1% of its budget on AI, it will be completely transformational. $200 million will be completely transformational. But remember what I said earlier. $200 million, but we've not even spent 1 million. So we've not done 0.001%. So we're not at the table yet. So this is what we want them to do. Governments and also businesses, the same thing. MTN is the largest telecommunications company in Africa, I believe. And they, depending on the year, make between $5 and $10 billion a year. Same deal. If MTN spent 1% of its budget on AI, we're talking about, if almost $100 million. And if they spent that, then entrepreneurs like us will have, huge organizations to serve.
Yeah.
But they don't think about building in Africa. They think about buying. They just want to buy from Europe, buy from the US. And perhaps the behavioral economics and the behavioral therapists that we bring in needs to come in and help us think through how do you help these decision makers understand why it's important to start to build today. Why it's important to change this mindset of buying and build. Because in the age of AI, it really has an impact.
I think you and I collaborated, or I a bit inputted like 1% into your report that you wrote with the UNDP about the importance of compute infrastructure in Africa. So, yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that and what's the impact if we're not making the proper investments in Africa in infrastructure and access to compute and GPUs?
Yes, in terms of GPU investments in Africa, because of this, like what I'm saying, mindset, lack of mindset piece, we've not seen those investments come in. GPUs are expensive, right? You can imagine a decent workstation costing around $50,000, or a large GPU cluster costing tens of millions of dollars. Okay, so it depends on how big you want to make it. They're expensive, and so it's a tough kind of conversation to have to speak about buying GPUs. But then one has to liken it to infrastructure investment that has happened in the past to help people in our government and our private enterprise to understand it. It's very similar to the mobile revolution that happened with telecommunications, right? Because those radio stations, those radio masts, they also cost $50,000, and when you have many of them, they're very, very expensive, right? They cost tens of millions of dollars to put those things together, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. But we made those investments in Africa roughly around 2 decades ago. We made those investments because you invest those in those big machines, but then hundreds of millions of people make phone calls because you have those investments, right? So
Yeah.
even though those phone calls are kind of cheap, but hundreds of millions of people are doing that. AI is literally the same thing, where we need to make those investments and create these AI tools that completely transform the future, where you're going to now have your hospital in your phone. Your hospital is going to be in your mobile phone, right? Your school is going to be in your mobile phone. It's going to be in your pocket. You have a hospital in your pocket, and every hundreds of millions of people are going to be using this, and they're going to be generating the economic return on investment that is needed. So this is how, at least, I am able to conceptualize the return on the AI investment. And somehow this story needs to be told to the decision makers on our continent.
Yeah, so then
Yes.
the last leg of the stool is also the data. And there's, I often get asked this question. I think it's sometimes a misleading question, but people talk about the importance of data, like data fuels the AI models and AI work and solutions. And there's this narrative that there is no data in Africa. So what do you say to people when they ask about, is it true there's no data in Africa?
Yes. Believe it or not, I still go to school. I am doing an online master's program in policy and governance. And in my class just 3 days ago, this was the topic of conversation. And the faculty was, his name is Emeka Okoye. He's one of the earliest tech people on the continent in the 1990s, building websites. But more importantly, was one of a couple of people who were driving open data initiatives in Africa from really early on. And he told stories of how by 2011, 2012, he had already set up an open data initiative in Edo State, Benin City, which is where I grew up within Nigeria. And there were several of those. There was a lady in Kenya who started some open data thing there as well. There were several of them who had already in 2011, 2012 started to think about this and see that was important. So really, Africa is not behind in terms of foresight or vision or people or talent. We're behind in terms of investments. The investments just don't happen, right? So they started this open data initiative, but it kind of got deprioritized and kind of killed. So we didn't get that opportunity for there to be a lot more data in the African society. as there is in other parts of the world. A strong point Emeka, the faculty, was trying to make was that the countries that are doing really well in AI today, they had data projects like this run for at least 8 years to create a huge amount of data that would then be fed into artificial intelligence, into AI, because AI studies data, recognizes patterns, and uses it to create insights and answer questions and things like that. So that's a boat that Africa refused to get on in the early 2010s. So yes, that is a challenge. But I always like to say, I come from a place where, yes, I see that as an insurmountable challenge. I see Mount Everest, but I like to think of what is the first step towards climbing Mount Everest, right? So yes, Africa missed the open data train and will not gather data for 8 years, but it doesn't mean we should wait for 8 years before we can build AI. There is data available today already, right? It's in fact, if there was no data at all, as an AI entrepreneur, you can find spaces to work in where you can gather the data you need yourself. I'll tell you a funny example. It's about facial recognition for cows. Who knew that's a profitable business? It's
Nice.
Yeah. It's like identifying cows. Why would you want to identify cows? It's incredibly lucrative. One of my most respected AI scientists across the world, who's based in India, they're doing this because the big, big farms, big farmers that have all these cows, just being able to use a drone to take pictures of their cows and identify the cows by their face. They're able to do the counting very quickly. They're able to identify those who look like they have challenges and diseases and issues. So it's really able to help them take care of these cows. It's really incredible and save them millions and millions of dollars, honestly. So with that use case, you can gather the data you need over several months and then train the AI model you need, right? So that's in the worst case.
Yeah.
But in the middle of it is industries that have a lot of data. It's now a case of how do you convince them to give you access to that data. So you have the banks, they have so much data. You have the telecommunications companies, they have a ton of data. You have the hospitals, they have so much data. And you have the government that has the most amount of data. And many other industries I didn't mention already. So there is a lot of data. It's not a question of who's going to allow you to get access to it.
Yeah. And like you said about the cows, it has to be driven by a use case, a value proposition that's going to be built with that data.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think your message is clear to the governments, and I guess those people there that, a call to action here is clearly about making investments. Even a 1% investment could make a huge difference and revolutionize reality on the ground. I'm thinking about for any of the AI builders, because you've also said how important it is for Africans to also be builders and not just consumers of AI. What message do you have for them?
Yes, it's build. We need the builders to we need African builders of AI solutions. We need them in the room because with them in the room, they are able to put in the work to gather the data that is representative of people from where they live, right? People from Africa. They're able to bring in their mindsets and identify when wrong decisions are being made about algorithms. For example, this is not even AI, but it's an example that works really well to describe this. In the early days of if you've ever been to the bathrooms at restaurants or the airports where they've created these new ones that it detects. You put your hand under the thing and then the water will come down. Well, the early ones, they weren't working for people with black skin because they didn't think about that when they were designing it. And so you would go and it wouldn't work until that happened for a long time before it got figured out. In AI, we need to be able to identify this very early, and you identify it by having people from all parts of the world as part of builders of AI, right? So today, there are people from Asia, people from America building AI, but then there are not enough builders from Latin America and from Africa building AI. So we're not able to bring our ideas to the table. So it's very, very important. And so the call to action is built. And I can share that at least from our end, we are trying to reduce the barriers to entry for building, right? So at Alliance for AI and Odoo Technologies, we've been able to get access to some GPUs that we're now offering to builders so that they can get access, right? So before your government decide to spend even $1 million on GPUs, we have gone and we have borrowed some GPUs from the US and from Europe for the builders in Africa so that you can leverage them on the Africa GPU Hub. So go on Google, search for Africa GPU Hub. You'll find a GH platform and you can go and get access to GPUs that are dedicated and focused on developers in Africa. And for others who have bought GPUs themselves, we thank you very much for taking that leap. You're doing exactly the right thing that we need in Africa. We'd also love to partner with you and put your GPUs on our platform so that the builders can access them and we can start building incredible solutions from Africa. I'm so excited for what we build in Africa. And of course, Celina, you're one person who probably knows more than most human beings on the planet what Africans can build with AI, because you have run a hackathon platform for more than 5-6 years now. So you are the home of all the African ideas that are waiting to hit the market.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, we know how much potential there is right there, untapped potential. So you've heard it here first. We're really excited about what you're doing with Odoo Tech and making GPUs. So essentially what you're saying is that builders in Africa can access really affordable GPUs through you. And also, if you own a GPU, you can also, I guess, monetize bits of that GPU, right? And make it more available as well to the community.
Yes, folks who have large GPU clusters can monetize them on our cluster on our platform because, for example, we found that many professors have small clusters that they don't use throughout the whole day. They take a break, they go home after 8 hours of work. So those remaining 12 hours, other people can log into your machine and use that, and then you get to make some money from that. So that's the kind of access that we're providing.
You know, we've talked about the cause that you're fighting for. So when you've achieved that cause and when the battle has been won, I mean, what is your vision? What would you like to see from AI in Africa?
Yes, that vision is a return of Africa to the table of innovation, where we are, and I say return because before the advent of the transatlantic slave trade, 450, 500 years ago, Africa was a very, very big contributor to global innovation in all areas, from mathematics to cosmology, understanding the stars, to cesarean section. I don't know if listeners are aware that cesarean section, which is basically when a woman gives birth, but through an operation. One of the first cesarean sections happened in Africa and Uganda, if I'm not wrong, or let's just say East Africa. That's where it first happened. So Africa was always at the table of innovation, but since the transatlantic slave trade, we've kind of left that table. We've been removed and kept away from that table. And we're now at a place where we have a mindset where we never build, we only buy. But if we're able to achieve what we're working on, you, me, Celina, and others who are in this space, we will return to a place where Africans are building solutions that help not only us in Africa, but the rest of the world deal with very, very big problems that are coming.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thanks for taking the time today to talk. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
Thank you very much.